China's Ministry of National Defense today alluded to the legal grounds for any possible intervention of the People's Liberation Army without suggesting any such action will be taken soon. And then we'll explore a new dimension to the crisis gripping Hong Kong. What explains a group of white-shirted locals fighting with black-shirted protesters on Sunday night, injuring dozens? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. If the situation deteriorates in Hong Kong, will the People's Liberation Army step in to help bring things under control? On Monday, the spokesman for China's Ministry of National Defense pointed to the specific law governing the PLA troops stationed in Hong Kong, currently numbering some 6,000. The law says that when necessary, the Special Administrative Region could request assistance from the troops to help maintain public order and conduct disaster relief. So exactly what does that mean? How is the one country, two systems arrangement reflected in such a law? And under what circumstances would such an option be adopted? Joining me today for the discussion from Hong Kong is Cheung Siu Wai, a senior lecturer at Hong Kong Baptist University, and in our Beijing studio, Qinduo, a senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution think tank, and Einar Tangen, a current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let me go to Siu Wai in Hong Kong to find out the very latest as to the public order, the security situation in that city since the weekend. So how is the situation now, and what has happened over the past 24 hours concerning the kind of protests and the kind of implications on people's everyday life?
I think so far, as far as I'm concerned, I think the city is still peaceful. Just a few minutes ago, when I came to this studio, I saw some youngsters on the bridge posting some posters, and nobody was stopping them, and everybody was passing by, and it seems quite normal. But early this morning, there was the disruption of the train service for the MTR in Admiralty, which is a very busy station where some protesters try to stop the train, try to prevent the train doors from closing. And they have some arguments with the passengers who were rushing to their offices and workplace. So there were some arguments, and some people called in the police, and according to later news reports, that a few people were arrested for disruption of the trains or other things. Because the bylaws of the MTR stipulates that if you are doing this, it's going to be punished.
Right. Well, exactly what are the reasons that these protesters were trying to do these things to disrupt the operation of the subway?
One of the reasons for that is that they think that the MTR authorities and as well as the Hong Kong police did not perform well in the kind of conflicts over the weekend, when some of the people protesting in Yuen and some of the local people wearing white shirts beat them, and they have kind of arguments, and then they shouted at each other, and eventually those people in white shirts used some canes and beat them. So this is a very violent situation, and they demand the police to do an investigation of those people. And according to the police reports, the police reported to the public, and news reports have been describing the latest development that several people have been arrested in white shirts.
But why, if you are not happy with how the subway authority or the police handled the situation over the weekend in Yuen, could you just go and disrupt public transport and public traffic in such a manner? So why?
I think over the weekend, these people say they called the police to protect them, but the police did not come. And according to the police officers came out and told the public that some policemen were called in, and they realized they were too small in number, only 2 or 3 of them. They could not stop this mob fight about, say, dozens of people. So they called in backup, and the backup came down. At that time, the beating had already happened.
Yeah. All right, to my guests here in the studio, Einar, what do you think of the kind of, seems like a revenge, right, to the subway system, to the subway authority for not having done maybe the right thing in the eyes of the protesters over the weekend in Yuen subway station?
Well, the subway authority cannot prevent people coming into a station and attacking other people. Just like, you know, if it had been black shirts attacking regular people, they would have been the same thing. You have to realize the police have been, all of their forces were put downtown to prevent violence from happening there. They were not looking for, you know, they were undermanned in terms of putting the regular police forces out in the other areas. That's why it took so long. I mean, the Hong Kong police issued a statement, said our resources were concentrated in other areas, our response time was low, the officers who were there were outnumbered, and they weren't in a position to do anything. So, you know, why these protesters think that it's okay to disrupt the lives of their fellow Hong Kong citizens. People have nothing to do with the police or the subway system. Why that would be appropriate is a little bit baffling. If they're saying they're trying to protect and promote Hong Kong, the rule of law, how is this possible?
Qinduo, your impression upon hearing?
I agree. I think, you know, like basically by stopping the train from normal operation, you are also disrupting the daily commute of a lot of Hong Kong followers, and also this is breaking the law, as my colleague pointed out. And you cannot say like, oh, I'm fighting for democracy or freedoms or fighting for my future by breaking law. It does not make much sense, and also it's very hard to be justified of such behavior.
Okay, let's get back to this law that we were talking about. Basically, the law governing the garrison troops of PLA in Hong Kong. This was raised during a press conference of the Ministry of National Defense by a journalist from Hong Kong, and when asked whether the PLA would intervene, the spokesman said, I'm just going to ask you to look at this specific law, which is called the Garrison Law of the Hong Kong SAR of the PRC, and look at Article 14 and under the 3rd chapter. But before we go into the details of this law, exactly what's peculiar about the arrangement for national defense between Hong Kong and other regions in China?
Well, the stationing of those PLA, you know, most of the time they spend in their barracks basically is for the defense of the nation or national unification, the territorial integrity of the whole country, and also the defense of Hong Kong. That's according to one country, two systems. So foreign affairs matters and the national defense you know, falls in the realm of the central government, and the daily business is under the control and the management of Hong Kong government. So, you know, but if there's an emergency situation, if say there's a failure to maintain the public order or there is a natural disaster, the Hong Kong government felt somehow they are not able to handle the problem, they can request assistance from those troops.
Yeah,
that's based on the law.
But it's not only request, the troops must do their duty. Under the basic laws, if there's any kind of disruption to the public order and or disaster, and there's a request by the Hong Kong government, they can't say, well, let's think about it. They have to come to it.
Let me read the specific text of this Article 14 under the 3rd chapter, which was alluded to by the spokesperson. This law says, when necessary, the SAR government could request assistance from the central government to help maintain public order and alleviate disasters. Once the request is approved, the PLA garrison station in Hong Kong would send troops, according to the order of the Central Military Commission, to fulfill such task. They should immediately return to their garrison after these tasks were fulfilled. Now, under the arrangement of the Hong Kong SAR government, the troops will be under the command of the highest ranking officer of the garrison or officers who have been authorized. They will exercise rights accorded by laws in Hong Kong while on such missions. So, Einar, what do you read out of these paragraphs? What are these texts trying to say in terms of framing the function, the mission, and how the garrison troops operate in Hong Kong?
Well, if you go back to the negotiations at the time that the handover, there was a lot of consternation about having a garrison in Hong Kong. And it was concluded that they would do so according to Hong Kong law, and that they could only be used for, as you said, defense of the nation, of which Hong Kong is part, or, as specifically outlined in Article 14. So it's the legal basis by which Hong Kong, a part of China, can request the central government to help restore order or, in the event of a natural disaster, come in and help. That was it.
Could they request just according to their wish, or does it have to, does the situation have to reach a certain point?
It has to reach a point where the Hong Kong government says that there's a natural disaster or they're unable to maintain order. There's no legal requirement. There's nothing in there that says this must go before a judge or a panel or anything like that. It is up to the discretion of the Hong Kong SAR government, which is empowered to act on behalf of the people under this one country, two systems.
But it is interesting that the spokesperson for the Ministry of National Defense did not suggest that the PLA troops would be requested for assistance anytime soon.
He couldn't.
He just said there is this legal basis, but he did not suggest that this would be anytime soon. Qinduo, how would you explain the message that they're trying to send, and how imminent do you think such an option such a scenario could be?
Well, it depends on the situation in Hong Kong. I mean, I would say, you know, people cannot assume that the protests can go on endlessly, and in particular acts against the national authority, central authority, for example, the defacement of the emblem, acts like that. If you continue with that, obviously there is a limit. There's the point that the central government feels that's enough. And so I think it's really relying on the Hong Kong government after thorough review, and you know, they would reach a conclusion whether they are you know, continue to maintain the public order or they fail to do so, and what they were going to do.
I would add to that the tipping point in this case would be acts of violence like bombs, Molotov cocktails, instances where police and bystanders are under threat or have been killed or seriously hurt. That would be probably the threshold by which the government, Hong Kong government, would say, look, we need to call in people who can help us.
That's that the SAR government has lost control of the situation, or does not have the capacity to deal with the situation. Let me go to Siu Wai. Siu Wai, how much discussion is there in Hong Kong at this moment about any possible scenario of PLA troops stationed in Hong Kong being deployed to help maintain public order, and what's the public sentiment towards any such a move?
I think this is just a kind of faint idea that people don't really believe that the situation requires the PLA to intervene in any form or shape. What we are doing right now is trying to figure out the situation, the issues, and the police, I think, in Hong Kong has the capacity. I think what we are now facing is lack of determination to do what the police should do. For instance, the laws stipulate that the PLA can take actions in safeguarding the territory as well as in natural disaster relief. This haven't happened any time in Hong Kong, but happened in Macau. Remember, a few years ago there was a huge typhoon, and then Macau was very seriously traumatized by this. Not only the property, but also people's lives were in danger. So the government in Macau called in the PLA in Macau to help them to do the relief. So this kind of things could happen if there is a real need. In Hong Kong, we don't see it yet. In natural disasters, we are strong enough to counter anything. So in terms of man-made troubles, there is not so serious as to the degree that the police authorities cannot maintain peace.
Is there any possibility, or is it conceivable that the PLA garrison troops would be deployed without the request, the explicit request from the SAR government?
I don't think so. I think the government in Hong Kong, the SAR government, is very clear that they have their responsibility to maintain law and order in Hong Kong, and they forcefully say that the people who conducted violent actions should be penalized. And this is underway. Some of the people have already been arrested. I think the police have the capability. I think they lack the will and some determination yet.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break, and you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll continue our discussion right after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to a very special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. We have in Hong Kong Cheung Siu Wai, a senior lecturer at Hong Kong Baptist University. In the studio, Qinduo, a senior fellow at the Pangoal Institution think tank, and Einar Tangen, a current affairs commentator, to talk about the situation in Hong Kong. Let me provide you with the latest from the regular briefing of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Tuesday, where the spokesperson of the ministry talked about the influence of foreign countries behind what is happening in Hong Kong. Let's listen in.
美国在没有自知之明，他至少应该清楚一点。
The U.S. should know one thing, that Hong Kong is China's Hong Kong, and we do not allow any foreign interference. We advise the U.S. to withdraw their black hands.
So it's very strong words there by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Hua Chunying. First of all, let me ask this question that's on the mind of many people who are watching this, who have been watching the situation. Exactly what are the UN, what are the things that China has been accusing the U.S. of doing, for instance, interfering in China's internal affairs by doing what, Einar?
Well, it's actually been long-standing. There have been comments by different politicians over the years at different points. But more recently, you had a Mr. Lee who went to the U.S. He met with Pompeo. He met with congressmen. And he solicited favorable remarks from them. And he deliberately said, I mean, he was asking that the U.S. intervene directly in the affairs of Hong Kong. So, you know, far from rejecting this, there were sympathetic remarks made by Pompeo and continue to be made by people within the administration saying that, you know, what's happening in Hong Kong. Now, most recently, Trump said that China is showing a lot of restraint given the situation.
Chinese leader, yeah.
The Chinese leader. But, I mean, the fact is, it is not unusual for the U.S. There's ample precedent where we have, in fact, interfered in the affairs of other nations. You only have to look at Africa, South America, even in Europe and things like that. And it's clear that there is a very organized group behind this
Before we go in there, I understand you were talking about Jimmy Lai, who is the former chairman of this Next magazine, which owns Apple Daily, a publication very much in support of the protesters.
He's one of the founders of a group that advocates for the complete independence of Hong Kong, separatism.
And he was most recently received by 3 of the U.S.'s top officials, Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and John Bolton. So, Qinduo, what do you think is the message that the U.S. is trying to send by having these 3 top government officials meeting this guy who is very much anti the central government in China?
Well, let me say, like, by meeting with Jimmy Lai and by these 3 senior officials itself, the act itself is a strong support of Lai's work. That is the independence of Hong Kong and the support for those protesters. So, you know, remember Pompeo, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, you know, he never feels hesitant to intervene in the internal affairs of another country, even included the United Kingdom. Remember what he said. Basically, if Corbyn is going to become the Prime Minister, we will do whatever we can to stop him. Even, you know, the most close the relationship.
Maybe the term interference into internal affairs does not feature in their dictionary. Is there a possibility?
And also remember the Congress, they discussed a bill basically to condemn China over Hong Kong, or to even impose sanctions of certain people over Hong Kong. So that's a support. And also if you check the revelation about the relationship between, say, for example, National Endowment for Democracy in the United States, and in their document that is available online, you can see at least 2 organizations in Hong Kong, they received money from that organization in the name of supporting democracy. So what's that?
Let me go to Siu Wai in Hong Kong. And Siu Wai, what's your take on this question here? What kind of foreign influence are you perceiving, are you seeing that has been behind the series of protests and violence that's gripping the city at this moment?
I think the local authorities here, the SAR government, and also the foreign ministries representatives in Hong Kong, in a few days ago, caught on the remarks by the British government which support the protests, but did not condemn the violence, and they think this is wrong. And these two organizations, the two institutions, one is the local government, another one representing the central authorities here in Hong Kong dealing with foreign affairs, they made it clear that the British high officials, like the Foreign Secretary, talked about this, and they think they did not condemn the violence, and this should not be considered the right way to do. And also, we would like to see some of the things conducted by different countries to support the peaceful protest, but also condemn the violence. This is the message that the local governments and also the representative of the foreign ministry from Beijing trying to send out. In the meantime, I think the Beijing Foreign Ministry spokesperson today talked about these very clearly pointing to the U.S. interference or something like that. I think it's like your two guests said, it's mainly about Jimmy Lai's visit to Washington.
However, one of the questions
being received by the officials.
Yeah, one of the questions, and let's not forget, Ms. Hua Chunying used the word the black hands. You know, he's asking the U.S. to take back their black hands in Hong Kong as early as possible. And it is not the first time we've heard that, we've heard accusations, for instance, the CIA being behind some of these protests. And people naturally are asking this question, what kind of evidence do you have to make this kind of accusations? Siu Wai, what is your observation?
I don't really see any official condemnation of the CIA in Hong Kong or anything like that. But there are a lot of messages, postings over the last several months in the internet or in social media that some of the people have the so-called conspiracy theories, and some of the people call this kind of color revolution, and all kinds of accusations or counter-accusations. I think this is something we need to find the proof. Nobody has shown us that certain people representing certain organizations or institutions has done certain things, because most of the things people pointed out are discussions or postings on social network. We cannot verify the validity of all these accusations.
I get your point. Yeah. Let me come back to our guests here in the studio. Any different opinions, Einar?
There are two NGOs that have been singled out by the Chinese government as having ties to the U.S. government and advocating democracy and independence within Hong Kong. This is two of many NGOs that are in Hong Kong. A lot of them are based there. And the question is, some of them are politicized. You can recall back to when Barack Obama said that he called on all of the inoculation groups to stop being used as fronts for spying. That was a bombshell revelation because people had suspected it. But I mean, this is the scope of interference.
What is about the lack of so-called evidence or proof of this kind of behind-the-scene orchestration or support or guidance that these young people were getting in what to do and how to do it?
You know, the NSA and the CIA aren't going to leave big footprints for everyone to find. I mean, that's the whole point. You know, their job is disinformation, but you have to think of this in the broader context. Donald Trump is trying to apply an all-pressure tactics, this big stick diplomacy against China. Is it so far-fetched that he would see an opportunity to light another fire in addition to Taiwan under China's feet in order to distract it from its trade war?
Yeah, I just find it It's possible. I just find it very peculiar that these young people who were supposed to be not organized, who were just ordinary students or ordinary young people, young citizens of that city, all of a sudden became very savvy in how to do a protest.
And where do they get the money? They're supposedly broke and they can't find jobs, but they have gas masks, they have helmets, they have gloves, and supplies, and signs, and all the signs are the same, freshly printed.
You know, and they know very well how to provoke so that you get the maximum damage, or you send your message very strongly without leaving any evidence behind, which could possibly get you into trouble. This I just don't understand, Qinduo.
This is so-called, you know, they're using back the so-called marginal violence theory. That is like, okay, you don't use violence or advocate violence because that's against the law, but you push as aggressively as possible in non-violent means to...
Or damage properties.
Yeah, damage properties, to push the limit of the government and the police force, and to let them make mistakes. And then you have your voice being, you know, it's like a loudspeaker, right? Being heard as far as possible.
Yeah, that's why I think I do want to touch on what happened over the weekend in the subway station called Yuen, where this group of white-clad people, local people, were seen, filmed, engaged in fights against black-clad protesters. Exactly what happened? Because right now, the UK, Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong, is denouncing violence. You know, despite all of the violence and the vandalism that was happening, right now, he's denouncing violence. Exactly what happened?
Well, violence should be denounced by whatever side, either, you know, by the white-clad people or the black-clad people. What about the violence against the Legislative Council? What about the violence, you know, defacement?
Who are these white-clad people?
Oh, I would say, my guess is the local community people. People live there, the residents, because their business have been disrupted by those protests. And also people are fed up with all those endless protests. They say, you know, leave us alone. Don't come to our region, our area, to disrupt the order and the situation.
But they seem to be armed, you know, either with wooden sticks or whatever, and they were kind of organized. They were all wearing white shirts. What was happening, Einar?
The truth is, Hong Kong has a long history of triad involvement, and they're still there. They were mostly tamed when China came in. They don't have the same level and scope of activities, but these locals do band together, and as we've seen in the past, they get very angry when their businesses are disrupted. We saw that during the last umbrella movement, where they attacked these students because they were interrupting.
All right, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my guests, Siu Wai, Einar Tangen, and Qinduo. You have been watching The Point. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.